Hey, my name is Mario Melendez. I'm professor of Old Testament Hebrew and Biblical Studies at Oklahoma Baptist University. We're going to start a new series together for the next few weeks to talk about cultural conversations with Jesus. And what's quite interesting is that the cultural conversations that are had with Jesus in these texts are actually with ladies. So we tend to spend a lot of time thinking about the conversations of the disciples with Jesus, such as Paul, such as Peter, such as John, etc., fill in the blank. But I want us to focus on some of the ladies of the New Testament and the impact that they had upon the church. We're starting out with one of our ladies. Her name is Mary in the book of Luke, chapter 10. And it starts there in 38 that Jesus is traveling, and this lady named Martha invites Jesus into their house. Martha continues about her way, doing the duties that she was going to do to prepare the meal, probably to prepare the house for company. And yet Mary is noted as being seated down at the Lord's feet there in verse 39. And it says, and she sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. Whenever we think about cultural conversations in regard to ladies that we're going to look at for the next few Bible studies, I want us to note a couple things. One, I want us to note the culture. I want us to note also the placement or the body position that we find the lady in. And then number three, I want us to note what the implication there is for all of us. I find it quite neat that he starts out there in the text, Luke does, and he says, this man has a lady sitting at his feet. If you don't know about the book of Luke, Luke is written toward the end of the apostles' careers. Luke was a disciple of the apostle Paul. And Luke is writing his gospel to be a legal defense of Jesus. And so whenever you read through the book of Luke, he notes Jesus caring for Romans, Jesus caring for ladies, Jesus caring for Samaritans, Jesus caring for other people that randomly pass along the way. This is where we get a lot of the great parables of care and love for other people. I think one of the reasons why is because in Luke, he's trying to defend and say this, that Jesus is not your cultural normal rabbi. And in fact, I would espouse that Jesus in the book of Luke is somebody that should not have been crucified. Hence the legal defense of Luke for Jesus in this text. So now we find ourselves in chapter 10. We have a lady sitting at the feet of a rabbi. This is a very strange phrase, and it comes up in one other place, which is quite important to parallel with this text. It comes up there in Acts chapter 22 and verse 3, because the Apostle Paul puts it this way regarding himself. I am a Jew born in Tarshish in Cilicia, brought up in this city, educated at the feet of Gamaliel. Now, Gamaliel was one of the first century's great law keepers and teachers of the Torah and also the oral Torah. And he has that phrase there, and I was sitting at the feet of Gamaliel. That's literally the same phrase that we see here of Mary sitting at the feet of Rabbi Jesus. Now, this is a cultural conundrum for all of us that have ever read anything about the New Testament period. Ladies should never be educated. That's the norm in the culture. Ladies were never invited to sit. Whenever we read in Dr. Keener's book about Paul and women in the New Testament, or in his commentary on this text, Dr. Keener makes a really astute point that you only ever sit at the feet of a rabbi if you're going to then be sent out to teach what you just learned. So not only do we have Mary sitting at the feet of Rabbi Jesus, but within this is the connotation that Mary would later be sent out to teach. And in fact, early church history, rumor, oral tradition, if you want to call it that, says that Mary was sent out to teach and helped train in other churches and go about in this way. So what do we learn here contextually, culturally? What do we learn about her body position? And what do we learn about the implication for us? Well, contextually, this lady should have been with her sister in the kitchen, doing whatever ladies were doing in that day and age. But yet we have Mary here in the text at the feet of Jesus. Contextually, this conversation happened in a place it never would have happened prior to Jesus. I find this quite confirming and quite helpful for those of us that desire to speak to the Lord. Prior to Jesus, those of us that are not Jewish by faith would not have heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. But yet those of us that are not a part of the Jewish faith are welcomed to sit at the feet of Jesus. Mary in this text does that. A lady that should not have had that opportunity sits there. What we learn about theologically in regards to Jesus and Mary from her position is that he knows things that she doesn't know. I mean, that's quite understood quite easily that she's sitting at the feet of Jesus and being taught by him, but whenever you sit below somebody, they have a different perspective than you do. My mom, she does embroidery work. She likes to embroider flowers and things like that into pillows. And so whenever I was growing up, my mom, she would take a piece of linen and put it into this little wooden hoop, and she would draw her design that she was going to embroider, and then she would embroider it. Well, as a kid growing up, as a little kid, of course, and being on the ground playing with my cars or my Legos, whatever the case is, I could not see what my mother was doing. From the bottom side, it looked like a just tangle of web. I mean, if you've ever seen the backside of a rug, that's essentially what the backside of embroidery looks like. I mean, there's just colors going everywhere. There is nothing intelligible at all. But my mother, from the top side, can see a beautiful piece of art coming together. To paint a picture, as it were, to sew a picture so that she might enjoy it and other people might enjoy it thereafter. In fact, my mom's embroidery work is always pillows because people need pillows and she knows people will use them. Well, Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. There's a lot of things that Mary doesn't know, and she admits that just by her bodily position of sitting there. But she also recognizes, and we see this in this text, he's not called rabbi. He's not called, hey, mister. He's not called Jesus, but rather we see it there, Lord. I think that what we see with regard to Mary's position is that she doesn't know things, but he does, and Mary recognizes that by recognizing his lordship. Martha also recognizes his lordship, but she doesn't get it. How do we know this, Mario? Look there in 41 with me. The Lord answers Martha's rebuttal about Mary learning. You are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. He doesn't complete that sentence. That's a dangling ... That's the little spinning bubble on your text message, like, I know they're texting, but I haven't gotten it. There's one thing, Jesus, are you going to tell us what one thing is necessary? Well, I think that we glean from this text, one thing that is necessary is submission to the Lord. That's what we see. She has learned and claimed and has desired the one thing necessary, and that's submission to the lordship of Jesus Christ. And we see that by her sitting at his feet. So culturally, this should have never happened. Theologically, she's admitting that he is the Lord. He knows things she doesn't know. Missionally, Mary, there in 42, puts it this way, Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. Now let's think through this culturally. Once again, Cultural Conversations is this study, and culturally, Mary would have never been taught by a rabbi as such in this text. The one thing that she receives is the teaching of Jesus, and you can't take that away. I find this quite encouraging, again, as a non-Jewish person, that when we submit to the lordship of Christ, we get him as Lord in our life, but we get his knowledge, we get his confidence, we get his comfort, we get his vision of things that we can't see, and as a result of that, that can't be taken away. The Apostle Paul puts it quite well for us in another passage. For me, to live is Christ, to die is gain. The life that I now live, it is Christ who lives within me. And I find great comfort in that, and I think Mary would have too, knowing that I have something that can't be taken away. Jesus tells us in one of the other Gospels, store up your treasures where no rust will get it, no moths will get it, no thieves will steal it, but store up your treasures in heaven. And the heavenly treasure is this, principally, the Lord in your midst. So whenever we think about this text here, Jesus was going along the way, and then Jesus welcomes a lady to sit at his feet. So maybe as you go into your groups and think about these things, here's some questions for you to ponder upon. One question might be this: have you been walking in need of the Lord to call you into his presence? Because I want to let you know that the Lord calls all of us. Come, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So as you're walking along the way, do you get called into His presence? 2, question for you. How in your life have you shown a bodily submission to Jesus? Mary, once again, is sitting at the feet of Jesus. Ann Spangler and Lois Vickberg wrote a great, beautiful book that I would encourage to you called Sitting at the Feet of Rabbi Jesus. And they begin their book by starting out at this point that all of us are not only open to coming and learning from the Messiah, but all of us are called to submit and sit at the feet of the Messiah. And third question is this: do you treasure that? Do you treasure the fact that the Messiah has welcomed you into His midst, has given you cultural things that we should not have gotten? Again, I'm not a cultural Jew. I'm not Jewish by blood, but I've received the bounty of Christ's love, grace, mercy, and salvation evermore. So have you received this truth in your life that it cannot be taken away from you? And number 4, and as I said, it's not in our text, but according to church history, Mary goes on to be a beneficiary, goes on to be a teacher, goes on to be a matriarch of the early church. So it's one thing to show up to church and get taught. The second side of that same coin is go and teach it. Jesus never welcomes somebody into His group in order to teach them to not turn around and send them out. This is why we have so many different instances where Jesus welcomes somebody into the group and then He says, hey, go. He welcomes in a conversation that we'll have in another day a Samaritan lady, and then He sends her out, go and sin no more. And you know what happens whenever she goes out is the entire town hears about the Messiah. So, cultural conversation for today is this: are you willing to humble yourself and sit at the feet of Jesus, so that you might hear the voice of Jesus, so that you might recognize the lordship of Jesus, so that you might be able to go and tell about Jesus? This is culturally contradictory. This is our Savior, and this is why He should not have been crucified. But praise the Lord, He's with us forevermore, reigning on high. The word of the Lord for the day. Blessings.